In America, the war on COVID is really being fought at the grassroots level, neighbors going door to door in the name of public health. That's especially true in rural parts of California, like Stockton. One group, Little Manila Rising, is hoping its efforts will get vaccination rates to rise by November. After 3 months, they've helped the city get to over 50% vaccinated. But it hasn't been easy. Anti-vaxxers want no part, and one person even pulled a gun on a Little Manila canvasser. Amy Portello Nelson runs the Get Out the Vaccine campaign for Little Manila Rising. She talks about the campaign to get out the vaccine. Next on Emil Guillermo's Takeout. It's Emil Guillermo's Takeout from Emil Guillermo Media. We do a daily show on Facebook Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific at emilguillermo.media and at amok.com, amok.com. And if you're listening to this on the very first day that this drops, or the first week, well, we talk about the Great Delano Grape Strike, which happened in 1965. September 7th, they voted. September 8th, they went on strike. And it was all started by Filipino Americans and the leader, Filipino-American labor leader Larry Itliong. We talk about that on the live version of Emil Guillermo's Takeout. Check that out. We also talk about the news from my point of view. But on these podcasts, we showcase Asian American issues and activism, Filipino Americans, like today's show, where we focus on Little Manila Rising, a group that has become a vital player among nonprofits in the Stockton, San Joaquin County area. Formed as a community nonprofit to preserve and spread Filipino culture, arts, and history in what was once the largest Filipino community outside Manila, founders Dylan Delvo and the late Don Mabalan have seen their mission evolve. Now it's all of the above, plus the urgent needs of the community right now. When Don Mabalan died 3 years ago from an asthma attack, the roots of her illness go back to growing up in Little Manila. Flanked by freeways and an inland port, it's one of the most polluted areas in California. That circumstance made environmental social justice a priority. And then when COVID hit in 2020, Little Manila Rising wanted to make sure people were getting the information they needed to make the best choice on getting vaccinated. Amy Portello Nelson grew up in Delano during the grape strike and has worked in the Bay Area and now leads Little Manila Rising's effort to get out the vaccine, a campaign that actually goes door to door to get the vaccination rates up. It's working. The area Little Manila is canvassing is north of Midtown, away from the south side, and with a handful of paid staff, they've knocked on more than 32,000 doors and had more than 20,000 conversations. And the reaction has been intense. Someone even pulled a gun. Anti-vaxxers are the mostly white and resentful, but even people of color are distrustful of the government, especially when it comes to information and immigration. It's not an easy job, yet Portello Nelson looks to be doing it at least through the end of October, possibly November. The country is around 50% vaccinated, just like Stockton, San Joaquin County, which is around 53%. It's believed the country needs to be around 70 to 80% vaccinated to have a decent chance at herd immunity. And that's what makes Little Manila Rising's Get Out the Vaccine project so important. Amy Portello Nelson tells me about coming to Little Manila, the campaign to get the vax out, and she talks about the canvassers, how they're masked at the door, and they come only armed with information and greeted by people they're just trying to help. Here's my interview with Amy Portello Nelson on this edition of Emil Guillermo's Takeout.
I feel very blessed to have played a tiny, tiny role as maybe a little bit of a catalyst for the growth. A couple of years ago, it was after Don passed, and the leadership started looking at, asthma rates. it wasn't anything that Little Manila had looked at before or even thought about. I know for a long time, Dylan deliberately was trying to stay very focused on the mission of their work, ethnic studies, the dance collective, all of the historical preservation. Um, and that was the right thing to do. They didn't have the capacity to grow. But after Don passed, they started looking at how asthma was really this slow moving bullet that was running through South Stockton and eviscerating communities, and particularly the communities they were serving. And he knew he had to do something. And this opportunity for the CARB, the California Air Resources Board grant, came out, and folks were encouraging him to apply to start getting into the environmental justice game. And my partner and I that I ran Substratum with, Dylan invited us to come and help write that grant for them. And so we just did a full brain dump of learning all of the statistics about pollution and carbon monoxide and greenhouse gases and on the south side, and we're able to put together a successful grant that kind of, I think, launched this environmental justice work. But it was really, really the work of the staff on hand that it has made it what it is now. And I'm excited that I've been able to come full circle and join the team. I've been on the team officially for about 2.5 months now, and helping to lead some of their COVID work. So it's great to be a part of it.
So you're kind of like the Swiss Army knife of Little Manila Rising, which is great. I mean, you need versatile people to come in and do these things to make an organization what it is. And it sounds like when there's a problem like COVID, boom, here it is. You're able to do this door-to-door operation. And I noticed that in your email, it said GOTV, get out the vote. What is the connection between get out the vote and get out the vaccinated? I guess it's a natural correlation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the state actually contacted Dylan in early May and said, we have this initiative. It's called Get Out the Vaccine. What it is we're taking kind of the best of two worlds to try and encourage people to get vaccinated. So they're taking the strategies of door-to-door canvassing that political campaigns have used, hence the GOTV, get out the vote, get out the vaccine, and the tried and true, public health approach of using trusted messengers within a community to best reach people who are hesitant to connect with healthcare or systems and governance or governments. And I think a lot of that over the last 10 to 15 years through community health workers and promotoras initiatives have proven to be successful. So they're trying to combine these efforts into this program that's been a statewide campaign since the beginning of June. We are one of 50 organizations that were selected to implement this in communities that had really low vaccination rates at the beginning of May. And so we are one of 3 organizations working in Stockton, and we were assigned to work in the 95207 zip code by the state.
And what was the vaccination rate in Stockton? I assume 95207 is the South Stockton area?
No, actually. So we were brought on a little bit late in the game. And the 95206 zip code, which is the south side where the Little Manila headquarters are and where a lot of their work actually happens, that had already been assigned to El Concilio, another local community-based organization. And so they assigned us 95207, which is slightly higher on the map. So it is Hammer Lane to the north, the Calaveras River to the south, which is UOP area, the I-5 to the west, and West Lane, so almost to the 99 on the east. So it's a big chunk, but it's a very mixed area of wealth and pockets of poverty, conservative, progressive. It's been really interesting to have our canvassers in that area because it's so different from where Little Manila usually does its work in South Stockton.
And it's not, I know that area having been a columnist in Stockton. So that's like UOP and that mid, the Miracle
Yeah.
Mile area, right?
It's slightly north of the Miracle Mile, but the houses around there are still very similar, that
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Oh, so you're north of Hammer.
No, we're south of Hammer.
South.
We to the south, it's the Calaveras River is our south border.
Okay.
So it's right there where UOP is.
Right. Okay, I got you now. So just north of that Miracle Mile area,
Correct.
and so it is a varied area. Like that's around Ben Holt.
Yes. Yeah. So it includes all of the Lincoln Village area, all of Ben Holt, all of March Lane, all the way out to West Lane and the I-5. So yeah.
You get the best lumpia spots, but that is not Little Manila. So now this is your charge to put it together. Did you have any experience going door to door?
I have. I've volunteered for political campaigns in the past. I have not worked on a political campaign formally, but I have definitely done my share of door-to-door canvassing. But I knew that I needed a right hand who was more familiar with this. And so I was thankful that we had the budget to hire another canvassing manager who really has been managing all of the day-to-day work. And so my wonderful canvassing manager, who's actually leaving us today, I'm so sad, but her name is Ngazi Elabuike, and she came to me from TOLA, which is another local community organization that trains community organizers, and they do door-to-door canvassing, and they train folks how to do that. And so she's been a manager there. And she came on to work with us right at the beginning of the campaign and was able to make sure that our canvassers were really trained, was able to use the PDI, which is the canvassing data where we track all of the houses that we're at, all of the responses that we got from the community. And so I've been really thankful to have her as my right hand. She's transitioning out today, but during her time, she was helping to mentor one of our ACE canvassers who also went through that TOLA organizing academy. And Giancarlo Schabauer is now going to take over for her. So we're creating economic opportunities and youth leadership and growth in addition to that.
So tell me, how many people in that area did you have to canvass? What was the goal? How much did you reach? And did you get 100% of that? What were the numbers you needed?
We have gone through every house in that area at least once.
Wow.
So as of right now, our numbers are that we have hit 31,270 doors that have been knocked on. And we've had 20,134 conversations with residents.
Wow. And what amount of time is that?
We started on June 1st, so it's been a little less than 2 months.
Wow, that's a lot of people. And that's going what? Not round the clock.
No, our canvassers work 5 days a week. They canvass for 4-hour shifts. They go out in pairs. And we've had anywhere from 15 to 27 canvassers out every day. We currently have a roster of about 23. We have a couple that have transitioned out because school is starting. We actually have quite a few young people as our canvassers, which has been an amazing experience too, to be able to give them that professional development opportunity and good summer jobs.
And how long are you going to be doing that? I mean, you're having people transition out. This is going to be an ongoing effort, or is it finite?
Yeah, the program was supposed to end on August 31st, but it has actually been extended by the state. They've given us permission to do it until the end of November. We're likely we're going to try and do it through October, and we'll see where we are from there if we want to continue going. But it's really tricky right now with the Delta variant making rates rise again. We thought we were going to be mostly phasing out this kind of door-to-door work, but it seems like it's going to be we might be in it for the long haul, trying to get people vaccinated. I think specifically right now with schools starting again and our rates, not just in 95207, but in Stockton in general, the rates of vaccinations for young people have been really low. And so we want to do some more focus on schools, some more focus on how young people can talk to their parents if it's their parents that are hesitant about getting vaccinated. So we're trying to integrate the funding that's been available with this Get Out the Vaccine Door-to-Door initiative with some other funding resources that we've gotten that'll allow us to do some more of those educational workshops, town hall, focus groups, so we can really try to be strategic with how we continue to do outreach.
All right. Now, I want to get into what people said, but once again, your charge wasn't necessarily to get people to vaccinate, but to give people information. And it's a kind of a subtle difference, right? You're not twisting arms. You're not arguing. You're really just giving people information, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we talked about from the very beginning when we hired our canvassers, is that our charge is to give people all of the information that they need to make the best decisions for themselves and their families. We recognize that messaging for vaccines from the beginning of January, when everything really began to get released, it was on major news stations. It was primarily in English. There was a lot of medical jargon. And so there were a lot of communities that were not getting full, accurate, factual information, or were getting word of mouth information that was not necessarily true. So we really wanted to make sure that as we were going door to door, we were armed with, handouts, facts, FAQs, documents that were in plain non-medical jargon language in multiple languages. We hired canvassers that really reflected our community. So we have folks that speak Spanish, Tagalog, Bisaya, Hindi, Punjabi, Hmong, even a little bit of Japanese and Italian, trying to make sure that even if the canvasser that came to the door didn't speak your language, that they could get someone on the phone who could.
Yeah. Well, the thing that got me about it when I heard that they were going to go door to door, the leaders in this nation and in our country were saying things like, oh, they're going to take your gun, they're going to take your Bible, they're going to vaccinate you. Did you come up against people who would throw that back at you and say, oh, you're going to take my gun? You're going to take my... Did you come up against that kind of resistance?
Oh, yes. Yeah, unfortunately, even as we very, very strictly were telling our people, all we're doing is sharing information and asking if people need help with finding vaccination clinics or accessing vaccine sites, or help with signing up for vaccine appointments. We still had many people who came at our canvassers threatening to have them arrested, people who would curse at them, follow them out into the street, even as they tried to walk away. We did a good amount of training with our folks to make sure that they knew, not to reply, not to just to walk away from a threatening situation, to smile, say thank you, don't engage with anyone if they are upset or agitated when they're talking to you. But even in that situation, we had one person threaten to pull a gun on our canvasser. And it started a conversation internally when these things started to happen about how we, as a social justice nonprofit in Stockton, who are actively trying to reduce community violence and community trauma, what can we do? And are we perpetuating harm by putting our canvassers in a situation where some of them are facing these kinds of threats? So we tried to put things in place, like making sure they had safety vests and IDs, contacting the local police department so that if someone did call the cops on them, they knew these are people that are legitimately out there, that they're not violating any laws. But we have our canvassers continuing to be harassed by people who we are approaching. The majority of their interactions have been positive. We've actually had a lot of folks who are vaccinated, thanking them for their time and really appreciating that they're out there doing this work. But we've run across too many, as far as I'm concerned, too many people.
I mean, one's too many, but I mean, would you say out of 100, 20% were like that? 30%? 40?
No, I wouldn't say it was that high. It's probably between 10 to 15% of people. But I
still
think
high. That's still pretty high
it's
for.
still high. Yeah, it's enough where there are some of our canvassers that have been afraid to go back out and have needed to take a couple of days to do phone banking instead of canvassing, just to kind of try and heal. We actually had a healing circle space that we facilitated one time, and we might do it again. But we wanted to make sure that there was a space for people to unpack the feelings that they had around this and even talk about their own experiences. You know, most of our canvassers are people of color who are from Stockton. And so they've reflected on their own stories of their families being hesitant. Some of them were even hesitant to get the vaccine, and how it feels to approach other people about this when they know that those hesitancies are real, even within their own families.
Yeah, I wanted to get the fear and the irrational responses that you get out of the way, because that's what people see in the news. And then the rest of the cases, say 85%, were people who may have been open. I mean, they didn't, hurl epithets at you, at least. How open were they? And out of that 85% out there, let's just say, let me ask you this. The 10 to 15% who were harassers, I presume they weren't vaccinated.
A lot of them said, it's none of your business, which to me likely means that they're not vaccinated.
Okay, so let's assume 85%. The rest of them, what percentage of that group, that larger majority group, was vaccinated versus unvaccinated?
I don't actually have that statistic in front of me, but I can get it for you. But I would say the majority of people that we approached that had a positive reaction have indicated to us that they were vaccinated. There were, I would say, probably, if I was just going to make a guess, over 50% of those for sure were vaccinated.
Oh, that's good. What I'm trying to get at is the number of people that you were able to turn around. If after, if that greater group of 85% who were at least open to hear what you had to say, half of them were vaccinated, the other half not vaccinated, were you able to turn them around and get them vaccinated?
That's the hard part, is because we are not, we are helping some of them to sign up for appointments to get vaccinated, and we've helped about 100 people to actually verbally walk them through or help them to sign up for myturn.ca.gov and get appointments. But a lot of people have chosen not to do that because the online reservation system is really tricky and time consuming to use. And so one of the tactics that we've used is sharing drop-in clinic information. And so a lot of people have been interested in that, and they've wanted to go to a vaccine clinic that was being held at their church or their school or their neighborhood park. So that has been positive. We have had some stories from our canvassers where, the conversation that they had at the door was able to convince some someone that they should get vaccinated, or it was able to give them the tools that they needed to convince their spouse or their child, because they had been vaccinated themselves, and really what they needed was more information to be able to combat the misinformation that people in their family were giving them. So,
did you find there was a lot of misinformation out there that you were saying, oh, no, that's not the case? You're not
yes,
going to be infertile, or you're not going to be sterile. You're not.
exactly. We've had the magnets and the trackers, uh, stem cells.
What was
We
yeah, I shouldn't have stopped you there, but rank them from like the most likely excuse that you heard to the least likely. What was your top 10, would you say?
I think probably the most common one is that people think that there is a live virus in the vaccine, in the same way that the flu virus gives you a little bit of the active flu, so your body can fight it off. And so people were afraid of that. Um, I think my favorite misinformation one was that someone said that the vaccines were made out of aborted babies, and that was being shared actually in from a faith-based organization, and that was why that person chose not to get vaccinated, because they didn't believe in abortion. And I was like, there's so many things going on with that, and I don't feel comfortable combating any of those, personal beliefs. But at the same time, that's so full of misinformation.
So, all right, those are two. The virus is in the vaccine, and aborted babies are in the vaccine. What
uh,
other? What is the rest of the top 10? You said the scanners, or what?
yeah, that the virus contains a tracking device,
Mm.
where the government is trying to track your whereabouts. To which we always say that's what cell phones are for. They're already tracking our whereabouts,
Yeah.
and we give them full permission to do it. Um, uh, there was a video going around on TikTok for a while that I know a lot of young people were responding to and telling us about, that there were magnets in the tracker, and so they didn't want any foreign substance being injected into their bodies. Um, I A lot of people were hearing about the breakthrough cases, so people that had been vaccinated but had still passed away or were still hospitalized. And so we got some. What's the point if you're still going to be hospitalized or pass away anyway? To which we tried to arm our canvassers with data around, you know, how few people are hospitalized or die if they are vaccinated, versus the 99.5% of people who are not vaccinated, who are hospitalized and have passed away at this point.
Yeah. And did you have a favorite one, or did you? I mean, others that were so unusual or unique to Stockton?
Um, uh, no, not anything that's super unique to Stockton. I think a lot of it actually stems from the way that our community was treated during the first year of the pandemic. I think there is a lot of residual mistrust from the populations of people who were frontline workers and had to continue going to work, maybe didn't have health care, were forced to continue putting themselves at risk, were because they needed money for their families. They weren't given any support by the government at that time to be able to take time off and keep themselves safe and quarantine like they were being told to do. They had to go to their jobs at, healthcare, childcare, um,
So
working in retail and grocery stores. And
yeah, these are people who should be more rational, and they were being irrational back to you guys about why they weren't vaccinated.
not so much irrational, but they have trouble trusting that the government is telling them this is safe and that there's not going to be any side effects or after effects. It's not going to harm them or their families. And they're saying, how can I trust a government that didn't take care of me back when everyone around me was dying? But now they want us to just completely trust them that this is all safe. Another misinformation thing that we heard a lot was that the vaccine can't be safe because it was rushed through the testing process so quickly. No drugs have ever come out that were approved so quickly. They have to undergo years of testing and clinical trials usually. And so there was a lot of hesitancy about whether or not it was safe.
So now you see, you've got adults going out there in the name of Little Manila and this get out the vaccine drive. All not volunteers, they're paid as canvassers.
Yeah.
How do you arm them to fight all this misinformation? I mean, they've got to really sit down and not argue, but it must be difficult to deal with, because you're not just dealing with one type of person like you would in, say, if you were working just in the South Stockton area, like around where Little Manila is, and even that's very, very diverse. But in that area of Stockton that you mentioned, you've got a really broad swath of people there, from middle class, upper middle class, beyond, and middle to the lower ranges of the income class. How were you able to sort of be prepared for everyone, really?
Our canvassers have done a really good job. They share information with each other. We've tried to share news articles with them. UCLA is one of the partners with the state for this project, and their medical team has actually provided a lot of great training materials and resources for handouts that we're able to share with people. We have, I think, two of our staff of our canvassers who are nurses, and one who is taking their nursing license exam soon. So we do have some folks who are medical professionals. And as I was saying, my other canvassing manager, Ngazi, she has a master's in global health. I've worked in public health for a while. So between all of us just kind of sharing information, that's been helpful. So we do check-ins and debrief meetings every day of the 5 days that we work. And so that's a really good opportunity for people to share. This is what I came up against today. I didn't have an answer for this. And so people are able to kind of share their approaches and their strategies and the information. We're able to look up stuff and get back to people. So it's definitely been a collective effort. And I must say our canvassers have responded to all of these situations with so much grace and patience. It really takes a lot to canvass. I mean, anyone who's ever done political canvassing knows how you can get doors slammed in your face and people telling you off all the time. But this feels different. This is ongoing for months at a time. And this is something that has affected people personally through illness and death in their community. And so having someone yell in your face about how this is fake and we're communists, when you personally know someone who has suffered or passed away from this is really heavy. And so
did people say that?
Are incredible.
Did people say that? Call you communists and things like that? I guess that wasn't the worst thing they called you.
Yeah, the worst ones are probably not appropriate for online airing.
But this is the thing: you have to have the belief. And when you're going door to door, this is like vacuum salesman times 100, because you're not selling a product, but you're selling it costs them nothing really, the other people, but it's you're selling a belief in our country, our this community wellness, public health. But do you think you got the the change you were looking for? People getting vaccinated.
I think we are making a difference. I was just looking at the data today, and when we started in this zip code, only 34% of people were vaccinated. As of today, it's 52%.
Wow, that's great.
So I'm really happy to see those statistics, and I know that we are not the only thing encouraging people, uh, but I really do feel like our efforts are, personal efforts are making an impact. Everyone is coming to the door with their own story and their own approach. You're always going to get the people that say thank you very much and close the door. Um, but for those who have stopped to listen, we've just heard so many good stories about how people really appreciated that someone took the time to come and explain this to them.
Did you find a lot of people who didn't get vaccinated? Was the biggest reason because of misinformation, or the biggest reason because no one talked to them, or it was hard logistically to get to a place? Of those three things, which was, how would you rank those issues?
We definitely have people who have the logistical issues of not being able to find or get to a vaccine clinic. And those are barriers that we were able to get past pretty easily. But I think really kind of depending on the neighborhood by neighborhood, it is both people who just don't believe in the vaccine, who under no circumstances will be getting it. They're just anti-vaxxers. So I wouldn't say that that's the majority, but we've had enough of those, as well as the people who are just have misinformation and distrust of systems. And we know that that's not just that there's a lot of historical realness about why people don't trust our medical systems. I mean, everything from people who are dreamers, not necessarily trusting our government anymore, people who are afraid to get into any kind of federal database because of their undocumented status, which is, we see that even in school districts, families who can qualify for free and reduced lunches that won't fill out paperwork just because they don't want to be in any kind of federal system. We know that healthcare is difficult to come by in our county in particular. It is difficult for people to find quality healthcare, to get appointments, to get test results quickly. So there's this distrust in systems of healthcare in general, even if it's free, even if it's accessible.
Well, break this down by race. You mentioned people who are dreamers, people who are under DACA, but just in general. And, there are historical reasons why blacks and Latinos would not want to be vaccinated. You mentioned,
Tuskegee,
and even the recent sterilization reparations that are being paid out. The Latinx folks have just discovered that there were Latinos who were affected by that. I did a story in Stockton in 2003, 2004, finding it was mostly whites, but that was based on information from, maybe the 60s, and maybe subsequent to that, more people came in. But, the fact is, there's a lot of reason for distrust. How would you break down by race how people, either embraced or ran away from your door-to-door efforts?
I would say the majority of people who are anti-vaxxers were white. And the folks who had more distrust or maybe misinformation were people of color. It's not clear cut along those lines, but that is what we have found.
And you were also a pretty diverse group, even though you're from Little Manila. There were it was fairly diverse canvassing for us, right?
Yeah, and our canvassers do come from all over Stockton. I would say probably about 40% of them are from South Stockton, but we didn't limit that when we were looking for canvassers, particularly because we knew we were going to be canvassing outside of, South Stockton. So um, we have uh, Filipino canvassers, obviously being Little Manila. We did outreach to the folks that we've worked with in our programming first. We have representatives from the Latinx community, from the Black community, from the Southeast Asian and Indian community. We have canvassers who are white. Um, we
So
Yeah, we have a pretty good mix of people.
And so it looks like, all right, you mentioned the statistic, and congratulations on that, raising it from 34% to 52% in your area. 52% isn't 100 though, right?
So
And so you only got half, and the goal was to get maybe 75% in the nation, right? 75 to 80. So it looks like you might have a couple more months of work to do.
yeah, I think San Joaquin County in general is hovering right around 50%. So thankfully, we are a little bit over that, but yeah, there's definitely more work to do. And I think where we're at right now is trying to figure out, how many of the people who are unvaccinated are still in that pool of just having barriers that can be overcome easily. So just not having the information in their language, not knowing where vaccine clinics are or how to get to them, um, uh, being able to understand the medical jargon. We want to make sure we're doing a blanket outreach so that those kinds of things that can be easily rectified are addressed, and that we're connecting people with as many resources as possible. But it's beyond that. It's the ones who are still hesitant to make that decision to get vaccinated, that it's probably going to take a layered approach of, door-to-door vaccines, as well as focus groups. I know that we're not the only game in town that's doing this. Thankfully, there's been a lot of investment in several different nonprofits who are working with faith-based organizations. Little Manila had, I believe, about 5 vaccine clinics in partnership with
Right.
St. George's Church, which is very close to our center and who we've partnered with for years. And so that we recognize that at this point, the folks that are hesitant, they need to continually hear from multiple sources that they trust that this is something that is safe, from their schools, from their places of worship, from their work. So we're trying to form as many partnerships as possible, just like a marketing campaign, right?
Right.
You have to have at least 7 touch points, so it sticks in somebody's brain and starts to convince them.
Yeah. And how about as far as masks go? Because now the CDC has changed their, um, their rules in terms of masking indoors, even if you're vaccinated. And then, of course, there's going to be a time when, they're going to say, well, we may need booster shots. Do you go all masked to these places that you go door to door with? And do people greet you and are they masked? And can you tell of an awareness when you meet them, or a lack of awareness?
We definitely have all of our canvassers going to doors masked. We provided them with personal protective equipment as soon as they came on board, and everyone is always masked when they go to doors, even once it became safe and it wasn't the requirement to do so. Because we want to model that good behavior for everyone, regardless. And I don't think most people opened the doors with masks on, especially after June 15th when the state opened up again. And to my knowledge, not a lot of people have had masks on when they've spoken to our canvassers at the door. It is going to be interesting to see what happens in Stockton and San Joaquin County now that the requirements changed again yesterday. I know at school board meetings and even yesterday at the Board of Supervisors meetings, there was a lot of people advocating for what they call mask choice, which is, if you want to wear a mask, you should wear a mask. But if we don't want to wear a mask, we're not going to wear a mask. They're looking for more lax regulations. And with the CDC guidance changing yesterday, I have a feeling our counties and our school boards are going to be forced to comply with that. So there's going to be a lot of backlash from the people who are against that regulation.
Well, if you're going to have mass choice, you better have vaccination, right? And if you don't get vaccination, you don't get mass choice.
Exactly. I mean, I'm the parent of 2 children under 12 who cannot be vaccinated. And so for me, I want to make sure that my kids are going back to school in a safe environment, that everyone around them is masked, and that everywhere that we go, I'm not putting them at risk. So I'm fully in support of it, but I know for other people that they are not. So it'll be interesting to see what the door-to-door reception looks like now after this has changed again.
Yeah. And you're going to, it seems like you may be at this at least till November, perhaps, if we get the spike that some people say might happen if we're too lax and if we don't get the vaccination rates up. It's going to make what you do more urgent. And I guess everyone who's going door to door under the Little Manila flag in that area in Stockton understands how serious it is, huh?
Yeah, and I'm thankful that they're hanging in there with us, the ones that are not going back to school. They've really been committed. We've tried to have events at least once a month where it's either like an educational event where we actually had folks from one of Little Manila's other teams that was doing educational workshops and phone banking around COVID. They did a presentation for our canvassers about misinformation and disinformation, sharing a little bit more about historical distrust. And that sparked some really great conversations among our canvassers who just wanted to know more, who wanted to arm themselves. We're trying to create a sense of community with things like a pizza party and social opportunities, just because canvassing can be really isolating too. And it's so heavy to do that over and over again, to have conversations about COVID and vaccines. So we're trying to create that family atmosphere, which is really important, just in general in Little Manila, that idea of a sense of family in the workplace.
Yeah, well, rules for radicals, Saul Alinsky, you got to have fun, right? You got to make it fun. And so people who are, I mean, I guess you're tested regularly, right?
I am. Actually, we have not asked our canvassers to be tested regularly. We do ask them to, self-report and stay home if they have any kind of symptoms of being sick at all. And they've been really good about that. But yeah, we haven't required them to be tested.
All right. I'm just curious how this thing has been working. I'm glad to hear it is working. I'm glad to hear that Little Manila has branched out and was not given the South Stockton area where Little Manila is, or, it's been given a broad, diverse part of Stockton, because people need to know about do you say, hi, I'm with Little Manila, or do you say I'm with the county? Or what's your opening line? Knock, knock. What do you say? Who are you guys? I don't open the door for anybody.
Exactly. Yeah, we do have the canvassers identify themselves by name and say that they are with Little Manila Rising here in Stockton. So we make sure that people know that we are a local organization, that everyone who's coming to the door is a Stocktonian. Actually, we do have 2 people who live in Manteca, but they work in Stockton, so they're honorary. But yeah, we make sure that they identify themselves, because that's part of the strategy, right? Is having a trusted community messenger. But you're right in that it has pushed us beyond the limits of the area where we normally do our work in our outreach. And so, in that way, um, it is it is sort of a little campaign for Little Manila as well to make sure that folks beyond South Stockton know about the work that we're doing and the values that we hold as an organization.
Right, because Little Manila Rising, is that like bread? Are you like yeasty bread or something? What is this rising stuff? And I guess some people may not have heard, but maybe some people have, which is good. And if they haven't, then you get to educate them, and you get to build those community tentacles out there beyond Little Manila. One of the things that I like about you is that you're part Filipina, right?
Yes. Yes, my mother is Filipino. I'm actually from Delano, California, which is
the heart of it all.
yes, the other half of the UFW story.
Yeah, I've been to that hall. I've been to the hall in Delano, and been to the new high school when they had the 50th anniversary. Oh, that's all right. We'll edit that.
That's my dog in the corner.
That's all right. Dogs are fine. We love dogs. But I've been to the new high school out there in Delano when they celebrated the 50th for the grape strike. And so you grew up in Delano, huh?
Yeah. My parents both lived. Well, my dad lived in Ridge Grove, which is a tiny little town just outside of Delano. But I grew up there my whole life. My parents grew up there as well. My family was all farm workers and laborers. My grandparents immigrated here. My dad's side of the family is Mexican. My mom's Filipino. But yeah, this sort of diverse community. Stockton is obviously much bigger than Delano, but when I first moved here about 5.5 years ago, it definitely felt like home again.
Well, I mean, you're kind of you're the marriage of the twin towers of ethnicity in the valley, right? The Filipinos, Eight Leong, the Chicanos, the Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and you're the byproduct, right? The next generation.
Exactly. Yeah. And very similar to how it was here in Stockton when I was growing up, I didn't learn about any of this. We didn't have ethnic studies. I knew of the grape strike because my family was a part of it. Yeah. But I didn't study it in school. I didn't really understand the significance that, Robert Kennedy was at the high school where I performed as a kid. Yeah. And I didn't really understand any of that. So, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s and had gone away to college that I understood the significance of where I grew up. And, I knew I was around when Cesar Chavez passed away, and I knew his family members, and I knew that people didn't go to school that day, and there was a parade in the streets. And, but yeah, it's really interesting to, as an adult now, be doing this work with Little Manila and reflecting so much on the history of my hometown and the people there who are continuing that legacy, but also in some ways how there's still so much work to do.
And Stockton's your new hometown, and now it must feel like, in a way, you are carrying on the legacy of helping the Filipino American community, helping the communities of color rise. I guess.
My social activism came to me a little later in life. It was not until my mid to late 20s when I moved to the Bay Area. And of course, you live in San Francisco, you can't get away from it. But I was able to work with a lot of really wonderful community organizers and social justice activists, and work in the nonprofit sector as well as the government sector, and get a really strong balance of policy and systems as well as grassroots community organizing. And I realized how different those worlds were, and that there were not enough people making those bridges. And so that's what I've tried to do with my career is, how can we make sure that we understand that all of those things are important when we're talking about systems change, when we're talking about changing health outcomes and economic outcomes for a community. It's not just about policy or programs or funding or advocacy, that we need all of it.
Right.
And we have to create spaces and trust so that those voices can understand each other's perspectives.
Yeah, and you need the people power. You need the human capital, the people going door to door, right? One person. You change one person's mind in the community, you've changed the community, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful things about Little Manila is that everything is so community centered. It's how can we lift up community voice? How can we build people power and skills so that it's not representatives coming to the table telling someone else's story from the community, but giving folks the tools that they need to tell their own stories, to share their own strengths and challenges. Like with our canvassers a week or two ago, we had been talking so much about messaging and what works and what didn't work. And we gave them the opportunity to create their own social media flyers. We said, what do you think would hit home? Think about all the messages that you've gotten from going door to door. And, what are the things that you see that people just aren't getting that they need to hear? And they created their own campaigns. And some of them were funny. Some of them were aimed toward young people. Some of them were aimed to, dispel scientific misinformation. But it was really interesting to give them that opportunity to have their voice and their creativity. And now we're going to be sharing those through social media and printing them out and handing them out. And so it's just another opportunity. There's a lot of experts out there at the state level, at the county level, telling us what our messages need to be. And those are important. But the messages from the community around this are just as important.
Yes. And, and the message coming from Little Manila Rising, I'm really so glad to meet you. Dylan said a lot of great things about what you're doing for is it officially the Get Out the Vaccine program?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, really, when he mentioned it, I said, oh yeah, I can see that. And the V, voting, vaccines, it's the same thing. And it just makes perfect sense. And I'm glad to hear that, you got to 52%. You got to get to 80 or maybe 100.
Right.
So I want to, so we will talk again and we will tell the story of the Get Out the Vaccine at Little Manila Rising. Amy Portello Nelson, thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
Amy Portello Nelson, the manager of the Get Out the Vaccine program run by Little Manila Rising in Stockton, California. It could be the best bet toward convincing skeptical Stockton residents to drop the vaccine hesitancy and get vaxxed now. State-funded program now being implemented. And to show you how dangerous the job is, COVID struck Amy's household last month. Thankfully, she and her family are doing well. You can contact me at www.amok.com. Join me daily for Emil Amok's Takeout, streaming live at 2 p.m. Pacific on Facebook Live or on emilguillermo.media or recorded on www.amok.com. And listen to more of Emil Amok's Takeout, the Bonafide podcast on Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Emil Guillermo.